Good people, welcome to the Prodigious Leadership Podcast. Another yet episode. This is a special one. I'm tuned in with my good sir. Sir, please may you kindly introduce yourself, let our viewers know where you're tuning in from, and we can get started with the interview.
Hello, my name is Rufus Chambers, and I am here in Los Angeles, California, in the United States, and truly excited to be able to have this conversation and just share a little bit. So, hope and prayer is that today's discussion will enrich you in some way.
Absolutely. I know and believe it's going to enrich someone today as well. I actually want to start off by saying that one of the main pertinent reasons why I admire you, your work, and your dedication is because of how you have deliberately dedicated your life's work toward enabling other leaders, organizations globally to be able to implement their visions and to be able to implement their life's purpose into it being translated, into it being material from birth. And that's actually one of the main focal points that I want us to focus on today. You do have a book entitled Does Your Vision Need an Engineer? We're going to make that available for our viewers as well. But one thing I want to say is, before we get into it, we've heard many and different concepts of vision, and we've heard this subject matter tackled on numerous fronts and different perspectives and outlooks. Speak to us about the true source of vision, and how does one know, particularly a leader, that they have identified with the right vision for their life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, as followers of Christ, so I'll speak in that context. I believe that a vision is something that has been given to an individual by God Himself. And I like how you couch the question, because some people struggle with identifying a divinely inspired vision versus some vision that may be birthed out of a person's flesh or out of rejection or just even the culture of the day. So I'm happy that you asked that question. So as a believer, it's important that as we hear from God, as we see from God, as we receive downloads from the divine, that we try those visions and inspirations, by the Spirit of God and from God. It's going to align with the Word, and it's going to allow our Father to be glorified. And that can be challenging in today's culture. We live in a very competitive, constantly being challenged to size ourselves up against our peers and colleagues, and that can really distort vision, because if you begin to define the success of your vision according to another person, you can absolutely get sidetracked. And one of the things that I've always used as a litmus test about vision is, especially spending time with some visionaries, a vision is something that you're really unable to shape. It's something that has a sense of permanence that is within you. So challenge will try and shake it. Life circumstances will try and shake it. But when that vision is a part of you, it really can't be separated from your DNA. And you and I, we've been around some leaders and some visionaries where you enter into a conversation with them, it's impossible for them not to talk about their very vision. It's in their vocabulary, it's in their vernacular, it's in their day-to-day conversation, because it's always in front of them. Some visionaries, when they close their eyes, they literally see the vision that God has imprinted within their very spirit. So I hope that that answers the question.
I love it. When they close their eyes, they see a vision that is imprinted within their spirit, which means that that vision must be predicated on that which you cannot necessarily see in the natural. And it brings me back to something that you've said in your book, that your vision needs a response from you and from the people that you are leading in the appropriate manner. Can you please expand on that concept? You've just iterated to us the direct source of vision, where vision, true vision, comes from, and how one can identify with it. Now, what is our responsibility as the one who's the receiver of the vision? What does that mean? My vision deserves a response from me. My vision deserves a response from those that I'm leading appropriately.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'm happy that we're having this conversation for multiple reasons. It's and the reason I say that is, you're challenging me to hold fast, to this revelation, that God has shared with me. But when you ask the question about the response, something that I'm reminded of even now in this moment is something that Bishop Tudor Bismarck said a number of years ago. And what he said was, after faith comes management. And he was speaking about that in the context of the story of creation, that, as God created the birds, the animals, the earth, Adam and Eve, after that, faith conception and faith realization, it required management. And similar to that, what Bishop Tudor Bismarck said, we have to be stewards of the vision that God gives us. And that stewardship requires work. It requires a response of work and stewardship. I'm also reminded of the parable of the talents, that the master can give a talent or a measure to a person, and it's the responsibility of that person to be a good steward of that. So the response to the vision is really sitting down and, number one, understanding the vision, understanding the vision, being able to articulate the vision, be able to write the vision, and then being able to create a strategic plan to execute the vision. It's important that visionaries still themselves enough to be able to walk through those practical steps, because the flip side is, I've worked with visionaries who have vision and who are now walking in their vision. The contrary is, I've met visionaries, gifted visionaries, and they know how to articulate vision, but they don't know how to execute it and strategize it and plan it. And, sometimes that can be frustrating and that can be disappointing. But the response is really the work, the discipline, the strategy, the execution. That is the response. And the beautiful part of it is, as you begin to walk through those practical steps, God will send you people that are called to your vision. That's the beauty of it. Vision does attract, just like the anointing attracts. Vision can attract. Andy Stanley has a wonderful book entitled "Making the Vision Stick," and in that book, he challenges pastors and leaders to, once a year, spend some time recasting, re-articulating, and reteaching the vision of the organization. And after reading that book, it made a lot of sense, because you can articulate it once, and then as the years go by, people can miss it, or you as the leader can get off track. So it's very important that we lock in and hone on vision and respond to it through daily practical disciplines.
I love it. Through daily practical disciplines. And I love how you said that there is a possibility that the leader can be off track as well. So I want us to delve into that. how does one develop adequate system structure and support that will govern the implementation of the vision that they have?
That's a great question. And, as you ask that, there's different seasons of a vision. There's different seasons when you need different people, different personnel, and different infrastructures. So, in the inception stage, you may not need a robust internal communication system. You may have a team of 3 people and you can communicate via virtual meetings versus in-person meetings, via Slack or something, where you're just chatting with one another. But as the vision grows and as the people grow, you have to always be thinking about what infrastructure is needed that can grow and scale with the organization and with the fulfillment of the vision. So there are different times where you have to double down and invest, into infrastructure. I know a lot of church leaders, if they have a 50-member church, hey, your internal tools and systems may be simple, but as you get into the hundreds or even the thousands, you have to invest in more systems because you're responsible for more people. You have to communicate in a different manner. You have to over communicate, because you're in charge of more people. And even when you look at the organizational structure of an organization, I'm working with a team now, and that was one of our recent conversations. Was the founder and the visionary created a very simple organizational chart that reflected how he wants to begin now. And I challenged him to say, hey, what does the organizational chart look like in 5 years? Because what he was trying to do, he was trying to assign titles of key individuals now, but those titles and responsibilities did not incorporate the future growth of the organization. So, as a visionary, you have to be able to look at where you're at, but you also have to forecast and begin to use your imagination. Use your imagination to see into the future of as again, and that's why we walk by faith and not by sight. You have to begin to watch this, walk through your vision in different seasons of fulfillment. So you can walk through your vision today, you can walk through your vision next summer, but you also have to have the divine imagination to walk through it in 5 and 10 years down the road. Because again, God will give wisdom and knowledge and discernment on how to not only build today, but plan for the future.
Wow, God will give you wisdom not only to build today, but plan for the future. I just wrote down a question that I thought of as you were saying that, that a vision has different seasons. Now, I want to talk about the season that every visionary goes through. Usually it may be the beginning phase of implementing your vision, but some may find themselves even being in that season, even when they've built an organization with multiple people. But would you say that there's a season where one may need to be alone and implement their vision to a certain extent in a place where they're alone and they're the only ones that have to bring it forth? That season of aloneness, that season where you may not have the support needed, or you may not even have anybody who has a clear, in-depth understanding of what you're trying to build. And let me make that question twofold. And how does one balance that? Because we live in such a time now that is very compensation predicated, And I was speaking to an individual about this a while ago, that so many people miss out on an opportunity to be a part of a vision because they have their minds on what they can get from it immediately where resources are concerned. So how does a vision navigate through that? I may not have the adequate resources to compensate people for their skills and time. So, how do I do it alone? Is there resilience that I need to develop in that season of aloneness? So the question is threefold. So I said the alone part. The second part
Yeah.
is how do you navigate that through such a highly compensation-driven time? And then the third is the resilience. Do I need to develop resilience to do it?
So let's start with the third. Absolutely, you need resilience. Absolutely, resilience is absolutely needed because the internal fortitude of the visionary will determine the likelihood of success. So, regardless of the season, the visionary and the vision will encounter challenge, resistance, betrayals, rejection, etc. So, the fortitude of the visionary is key, regardless of what season you're in. So let's go back to your first question. Your first question about that inception season when the visionary is alone. And those periods of isolation are very, very important to the visionary. And even as we look in scripture, when we look at the Apostle Paul, when he was on the road to Damascus, and the Lord revealed himself to the Apostle Paul or Saul at that moment, after Saul was blinded and after he was ministered to, he spent a period of years in isolation.
Wow.
And that period of isolation was critical because, and again, I know it's not necessarily all of this is recorded, but what we see is we see a man enter isolation and then we see a man exit isolation with a fire in his belly for the gospel of Jesus Christ and walking into a new season. So that season of isolation can benefit the visionary because the visionary can wrestle with the vision amongst themselves, you know, and that's very important. You know, we think about when Jacob was becoming Israel, there was a physical wrestling. And it's important that the visionary wrestles with God about the vision so that the visionary can wholeheartedly buy into it fully, because they have to be fully convinced that this is from God and that they're going to walk it out. So it's important that there's a period of time when they're just letting that vision get inside of them, that they're challenging themselves. How am I going to do this? Why not this? Is this God? Do I have what it takes? Do I need to go sit under somebody so that I can get built up in it? You know, they have to go through that period of isolation, because once they have that period, now I believe then they're ready to invite others into the vision. It's important. You think about Nehemiah. You think about when he looked at the tore down walls and he was vexed, he was grieved. At a point, he was then ready to go approach his master about, you know, what he had been called to do. And with that, he went and got resource. His master gave resources, right? It's at that point, now I can begin to build. Now I can invite others into my vision. So as you're inviting people into your vision, so let's switch to the second part of your question. As you're not only inviting people into your vision, some people will feel sent to participate in your vision. Others you will invite in. But vision is a treasure, and you can't have the wrong people around the vision. So when people get too aggressive with compensation and how they're paid, that may be a deal breaker. Not necessarily because of money, but because of the condition of your heart. I know a lot of pastors struggle when they're planning a church, trying to find a musician that is just not a hireling. Some musicians are hirelings and they want compensation. They're not concerned about vision. They're not concerned about souls getting saved. They're not concerned about people getting delivered and healed. And musicians like that, they may have a part, but they don't have a part in what you're doing at inception.
Hmm.
So some of this, the visionary just has to have a level of discernment and knowing that I need the right people on my inception team, on my planting building team, because there will be sacrifice, there will be an investment. But the flip side of that is some people, their compensation is them doing what God has called them to do. Their compensation is allowing their pioneer nature to come to fruition. So some people will love it, you know what I mean? Because they're like, wow, I have the opportunity to help build something. And then I also have the opportunity to use my gifting in an unhindered and an unrestricted manner. That is their compensation, so as a visionary, we have to be careful to not be driven by consumer mentality. And it's fine if a person has financial responsibilities and they need to be compensated for their time because of their family and whatever, that's perfectly fine, but that may not be the right person for you in this inception season. Some people, some young people, or even some old people, they may want to just develop their skill and gifting at the inception stage. So they may tell the visionary, you know what, guess what? I'm learning how to become a videographer. I would love to come and video record your podcast and edit it for a period of 6 months so that they can practice their gift and skill before they take their gift and skill to the marketplace so that it could be mutually beneficial. So there are people out there that will fit the season of the vision.
Yeah.
But the visionary needs to know and discern who is right and who is wrong for the vision in each season.
Wow. I love how you quoted 2 Corinthians chapter number 5, verse 7, for we walk by faith, not by sight. When I think about vision, I think about the law of faith, being able to grasp hold onto the belief and the action of something that you cannot see with your physical eyes. Speak to us about how much of a role and impact faith plays in the execution of a vision.
Is key for the believer, because this is something that my wife and I have found, being together for a number of years. There's seasons of our life when we are walking by faith and we're reaching for something. But then there's seasons of our life where we're not reaching for anything and we're not really walking by faith. For the visionary, it's important, especially at inception, because at inception, you don't have any fruit on the tree of the vision. So your faith is going to be a fuel for the vision, because every day you may get a no, every day you may get a rejection. And it's in those moments that your faith is going to give you a thrust, give you a momentum to carry on. So faith is so important. And like I mentioned earlier, when you close your eyes, you need to be able to see exactly what God has said, or you need to be able to see a mental picture or a mental image of that vision. In time, God will begin to bless. You'll begin to see the fruit of your vision. But it's important that we don't get pacified by success. It's important that we continue to use faith to get to what's next. I love listening to the testimony of Bishop Ivy Hilliard, because as we know, he's a faith man. And he has done an excellent job teaching the principles of faith and
from the little old raggedy building.
See, you already know what I'm talking about, because he talked about how he had to use faith at every step of the journey. And when his office in his first church building was a closet. And
Wow.
now they have, hundreds of thousands of square feet of property. But at every step of the journey, faith was needed to get to the next stage and the next level. And that's what, and even walking by faith, we have to keep in mind and consideration that us exercising this faith is to glorify God. We know what the Bible says in Hebrews, it's impossible to please God without faith. So even as you're reaching for what may seem impossible and unattainable, it's important that we know we're reaching not for ourselves and not for our own glory. We're reaching for the glory of God. We're reaching so that the work and the contribution that we make while we're yet on the earth will be pleasing in God's sight. So faith is absolutely critical. And, some would say if you don't need faith to fulfill it, it's not vision from God at all. If you could just do it in your own strength and your own ability and in your own might, it's not a big enough vision. It's not a truly divine vision.
Wow. Let us delve into vision engineering for your personal life as an individual. How can one engineer their personal vision from ground up, from how they execute their day-to-day activities and decisions? And can you give us examples of how you have engineered your personal life to fulfill your vision ultimately?
Yeah, no, that's a tricky question, because a lot of times when I'm talking with a person about their vision and the need to engineer it, they're trying to do so in the busyness of their life. A person may be working a 9-to-5 job, but has a divine sense of the vision that God has given them. And it's in that season that they need to split themselves into multiple parts so that they can handle their day-to-day responsibilities, but then also invest into their vision. So, what I challenge people to do, first of all, is make time in your day and week to spend on your vision. If you're going to be up 16 hours a day and you're going to be maybe working 8, commuting 2, exercising and taking care of your family, maybe you have 1 hour a day that you can invest into your vision. Wow. Whatever the amount of time that you have, you begin to make the investment. You begin to understand, the marketplace that your vision fits in. Maybe it's a business, maybe it's a restaurant, maybe it's an academy, maybe it's a after-school program, maybe it's being a franchise owner. Regardless of what it is, you have to spend time in understanding the market and the landscape of what you're doing. So if it's 1 hour a day, you begin your understanding, you begin your research and development process so that you can understand. Then it's important that as you understand, you can begin to write the vision and understand, okay, God, what exactly are you calling me to do in that sphere? Am I to plan? Am I to launch? Am I to acquire? Am I to develop? Am I to design? What are you to do? And then you can begin to put together a plan, because your plan needs to speak to a timetable. How long does each phase or increment of the vision need? Including that initial planning. So you need to put together a timeline. You need to begin to put together a team framework of who you need to help you bring this vision to pass. Who will be your mentors? Who will be your advisors? What type of corporate structure are you going to set up? Who's going to be on your board? Who's going to be your administrator? Who's going to be your finance person? Begin to map out a team framework. Then you can begin to also put together a budget. What type of budgeting, what type of startup capital do I need to do this venture? Do I need a lot? Do I need a little? How can I get that capital? Do I need to put together pitch meetings? Do I need to, put together small business loan applications? Do I need to target foundations? Maybe I can get monies from foundations because it's a nonprofit entity that has a social benefit. You begin to put together your budget. Startup capital, not only startup capital, but a working budget. What will be my monthly expenditures? So you're investing a lot of time in planning, you know, and then as you're putting together these documents, then you could be, you know, the timeline will say, okay, for these 3 months, you know, I'm building a team. For this 3 months, I'm strategizing with my team and assigning day-to-day duties. In the next 3 months, we're beginning this. You know, so that timeline helps you stay disciplined in how you're step by step working on the vision. And that's why in the book I use Nehemiah, because when you look at Nehemiah, you see that literal progress. You see progress, you see planning, you see strategy, you see communication amongst the team, you see Nehemiah dealing with resistors and retractors. It's such a practical chapters in the Bible that we can glean from as we're engineering the vision. And sometimes what visionaries will find is they need to find an engineer for their vision, because some visionaries, they're communicators, they're vision casters, but they're not administrators. You know, so it's important that visionaries find, if they're not built like that, okay, let me find an engineer that can help them steward and execute and engineer the vision. But you know, planning is very key, because you know, some would say, and I know for believers, you know, especially spirit-filled believers, you know, that it may not be intuitive for them to sit down and employ the discipline of planning. But it's important that we do so, because some would say, if you don't invest enough time in the planning process and you just try and stumble into it, you may never see the vision come to pass.
Wow, I love it. Enjoyed kicking it with you today, sir. Any last words that you'd love to leave with our leadership community?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, by the Spirit of God, many of us are sensing that there's a great transition that is happening in many facets of culture. Many legacy leaders are retiring, sitting down, and transitioning on. And it's in those moments that there's going to be a leadership gap and a leadership void. And it's the perfect time for you to begin to double down on your vision, double down on your planning and strategy, and bring your vision to your respective marketplace. Because as these leadership gaps begin to happen, culture, society, the kingdom, they're going to be in need of exactly what you've been called to do. So I just wanted to leave you with that encouragement based on the timing that we're in.
Love it, sir. Thank you so much. May the good Lord bless you. And thank you for taking the time to chill with us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. Blessings to you and the family.